So one of the greatest pleasures of organising these talks is actually the rehearsals. So I get to spend anything from 10 minutes to an hour and a half talking to folks a few days before their talk. And it was a real pleasure to link up with Tim and Emmie a few nights ago. They're brand new members of the OCC, at least I think they are. They joined in 2020, but they're both really enthusiastic explorers and adventurers on their own boat, and have sailed quite extensively up on the Norwegian coast and the Azores. And I get the impression that Tim's the sailor and Emmie is a later convert, but she's probably more at home like Sally in the mountains, and increasingly so with her paintbrushes, I gather. I had a look at her website earlier on today, and it really is fantastic. I'm sure she will mention that later on. So without more ado, I'm going to hand over to Tim and Emmie, who are in Bristol tonight, and are going to be talking to us about their summer cruise to the Lofoten Islands, which are in front of us. Tim and Emmie, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Simon. I'm just curious, does the audience actually see us at the moment? Are they just seeing the screen, or both?
So the audience can see the panelists at the moment, so they can see you and Emmie. Yep.
Okay, fine. Just in case just so we don't do anything too embarrassing while we're doing the talk. I've also seen something also really embarrassing that some of you may have noticed. We've left our fenders out on deck.
I was just looking at that.
Absolute cardinal sin. I always scoff at other boats. Oh, they haven't taken their fenders in.
But they're not actually hanging over the side, so you're okay.
Yeah, well, that is true. They're not trailing in the water. Yeah, that is true. Okay, we don't lose all the points. Okay, so yeah, so our cruise to Norway was in 2017, and I'm just going to give you just to kind of mix up this this talk a bit, just so it's not boats, skiing, and rock. We're just going to kind of mix it up with a bit of art, a bit of history, and a few other bits and bobs along the way. So I am from 8 generations of kind of maritime blood, which is and like my dad taught me to sail. This is my great grandfather, who went to sea at the age of 8 or 9, God, I can't remember, and started a business in the 1800s, which is still in our family today, which is in maritime. And that is his diary up there that he wrote later in life to record his account at sea when he went at such a young age, when he couldn't even swim. So another claim to fame that he has is when he returned from his voyages, he actually invented a system to send a line ashore. Now, up until then, people had invented a rocket to fire to a ship in distress from the shore, but it was always a bit hit and miss, literally, and also a bit dangerous in terms of people on the actual deck of the ship. So he invented a much more compact system that would fire from the ship to the shore. And we've got a lot of in our family vault. We've still got loads of archives of various maritime things, but this is a document that was written for the application to kind of get it approved with the Admiralty. Anyway, I just think it's just the language and the text sometimes is pretty funny. Take off the ends, handing the one container containing the fuses and matches to a trusty person. Ignite the fuse, stand on one side, and communication with the shore will be quickly established. I think that's great.
Fantastic.
These are the original diaries he wrote back in the 1800s, and you can see the dates at the top. And there's an account here. There's an account here where they were sailing back from the Mediterranean and got caught in what we think was a hurricane, only because they talk about the eye of the storm. But I'm going to just read some of this to you, because there aren't that many accounts from those days, nor certainly not ones where people have survived such serious storms. So at the commencement of the storms, we were laid to under reefed main and topsail. which we succeeded in taking in and furling, and laid to under bare poles, the sea breaking constantly over us with such violence as carried away all before it. We did our utmost to secure what we could, when our captain called us below and read a short sermon and prayed for our deliverance. As by all appearance there was little prospect, the sea took away all the bulwarks, fore and aft, both sides, tore away the longboat from its lashings and stove in the hatches partly. When every sea that struck us seemed to threaten us with instant death. Conclusion ultimately come to was the endeavour to throw out some of the cargo and lighten the ship. We made trial beginning in the morning, when we took down the steerage bulkhead and commenced our arduous task. We worked through the day at great hazard. About 200 bags of sumac and a few bales of compressed rags had passed through our hands and into the sea. When the storm rather moderated, we felt cheered to find the ship being lifted out of the water abaft, was not so much exposed to the waves, being less in the trough of the sea. We hoped the storm might have attained its height, but contrariwise, it only lulled to gather strength in the lowering dark red sun. It came again with redoubled fury. If anybody wants to read or to get access to the rest of that, I'm happy to share the diaries with them, but it goes on to say that it came back, the storm came back a lot worse, which would suggest that the eye of it had passed over them. And so that actually happened off the coast of Portugal, and they did actually manage to limp back to Southampton in the end. Anyway, I just thought I would include that as a bit of family history, because it's quite fun. And
I'll just add to that he was first out at sea at about 11 years old and is washed overboard for the first time, I think, by about 12. And the story goes on from there, which
that's my great-great-grandfather, not me.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So I'm a mixed media artist and exhibit in the UK and internationally, but a lot of the work is based on architecture and is based on particularly old architecture. India, Istanbul, Cuba have all been of particular influence. So I'll generally try and work from in situ and bring the work back and then complete it on a larger scale once I've got a bit more space. So once I joined the boat, that was all quite interesting logistics of how to continue making work and making a living while we were traveling. So I was used to putting things in quite a small space and then being able to move with it, but just space is obviously at a premium on a boat, so I had to work that out. These are some previous pieces based on Istanbul, where I did Cappadocia, where I was doing an art residency in a cave complex. So we had quite a nice cave actually that we lived and worked in for a while. On the right hand side is a picture of Porto. So this is one which was started off en route as we a year or two ago we were sailing down through Europe and were able to stop in Porto. This piece is Uzbekistan, and I'm based on the amazing silk route and all the spices and the trade route through that. And it was the camel up on the left hand side is to do with the Camel Festival, which happens in November at the full moon.
Okay, so this is the boat, a Seastream 43 built in Falmouth, heavyweight, semi-full keel, deck saloon cutter. Got her in about 2014 and spent a few years doing her up in Bristol before we went. Okay, so I'm just going to skip through this slide and just show the route. So in 2017, the boat was in Liverpool, and after sailing around Scotland the previous year, so we sailed up through the Caledonian Canal. That's where we popped in to see Bob Shepton in Oban and had a cup of tea with him. And he said, look, I can't stay very long. I've got to get back and pack because I'm off to Norway ski touring. And I was like, oh, that's funny, Bob, because we're going that way. When do you have to be there? He said, oh, well, I've got to be there in about 4 or 5 days. So I said, okay, tell you what, go back home, pack your stuff, jump on a bus to Inverness. We'll pick you up in Inverness and we'll sell you there.
Cancel the plane ticket.
Cancel the plane ticket, yeah, get refunded. So that's exactly what we did. We got a Bob in Inverness, sailed up to the Shetlands and over. And it wasn't completely altruistic. We thought, oh, he's going to Norway skiing on an old minesweeper, and they're going to know exactly where to go skiing, and we want to go skiing. So how about we drop Bob off, and then we'll just skulk around and perhaps
see which direction
which field they go down, and figure out where the best skiing is. So leaving Liverpool
was lovely. It was, so I hadn't Tim from 6, 7 or 8 generations of seafarers. I'd come from landlocked Oxford, where the closest I'd come to sailing was a bit of dinghy sailing in the local reservoir, where I seem to remember we spent most of the time capsized in absolute fits of giggles on the wrong side of the boat, trying to get it back up again. So I was under the impression that sailing was going to be a bit more like the Vendée Globe, that we just have to, once we got going, that we were just going to have to hold on for dear life and just be completely on the ball. As we left Liverpool, there were quite soon dolphins, which were joining us at the side of the boat. The sun was setting and conditions were pretty good.
This is actually now, we've actually gone up Stockton Island and now passing Scotland, but Emmie had a bit of a rough time until we got into the calm waters of Scotland. It all started well, did a bit of yoga on the deck, watching the dolphins, and then for the next 24 hours was down below being seasick.
No, I wasn't actually. I didn't leave the deck because I didn't want to go down. So I was freezing cold. I didn't get anything to eat. I didn't drink. I just lay there. This was the beginning of our journey, and it initially on my side was not looking too great.
Well, anyway, that was a few years ago, and we've continued to sail, so something's gone right. Okay, very briefly, up through, for those of you who've never done it, this is Neptune's staircase going into the Great Glen. Bob came to help us out, but conveniently turned up at the last lock and managed to get tea and cake just in time. So Neptune's staircase is a set of 9 or 10 locks up into the Great Glen, and then you've got a free run right the way through to Inverness. So over to the Shetlands and then across to Willisend.
We were also joined by Chris, by an army friend who did a great job on watch, because this was our first bigger passage, well, for all three of us.
Yeah, so our friend Chris, ex-captain in the army, and we're like, right, we need some manpower for the watches. So Chris joined us there. Here's Bob on the helm. And I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but hopefully. Anyway, I thought I'd just ask Bob to see how he's going and how he slept the night before.
I remember particularly as we were passing the entrance to the Firth, it was rolling tremendously, and I had to brace myself with both arms down my side to stop being pitched out of my bunk.
Do you think the skipper should have given up the aft cabin?
Well, that would be pushing it a little bit. Yes, I would hate to have disturbed the skipper and his lady and to have taken over the aft cabin, except of course it would have been very pleasant and I would have got a better night's sleep, but apart from that, we crew know our place, and we have to suffer while the skipper continues on his luxury liner.
Okay, so we arrive in Ålesund. we dropped Bob off on the old minesweeper that's going to go off into the fields, and suddenly realized why Bob, what attracted Bob to this expedition, as the minesweeper was full of young Italian ski guides. Not much more I can say to that. No, Bob was actually in training for his trip to South Georgia with Steve on Navarro, or so he had us believe. So Ullison was our first point of contact, and then quickly the next day off into the fields where we could start to see the beginnings of some lines to be had. We sailed up the fjord into Sebo, and this is our first taste of free or very cheap moorings in Norway, which would be the theme for the entire trip.
And really, really calm, well sheltered. Although at this point we were joined, a ski guide came over by chance to say hi, and also to point out how impressed he was that we'd arrived with full sails down the fjord. He then pointed nearby to a patch of forest on the mountainside, which was completely flattened, and pointed out the katabatic winds get really wild here at some point, and that we were lucky. So yeah, we could have done a bit more reading up perhaps about that, but we arrived safely.
Emmie, you've
got a question about what time of year it was.
What time of year? So this is going to be late March, early April.
We were really keen to try and get there as early as possible to try and make it so we were able to ski, ideally from the boat. At this point, as you can see, that actually wasn't going to be possible, although the mountains still look really nice and snowy all around. But we were trying to work out how we were going to get up there. So on our first trip, we got all kitted up. We walked out, and actually we then got picked up quite quickly by a coach that then diverted from his route and then took us part of the way up the mountain before kindly dropping us off. And so we walked the next bit with our ski kit from there, only to find that actually quite near the top, someone then picked us up as we were hitchhiking, someone called Ollie, who within 5 minutes of us knowing him, was just like, well, so you guys want to go skiing? I've got a spare car. If you need a car, then you can just borrow my one. Yes, no problem. And this was the beginning of just incredible honesty and hospitality of the Norwegians that we found in different parts. And we couldn't believe it that someone would just entrust us with their car who we just met.
Yeah, we had a lot of that. Actually, we had someone offer their house and all sorts. But Gary, just to answer your question, why did we divert through the Pentland? We didn't actually. That is actually an art. I took that map from an article that Bob did for Sailing Today, and I'm not sure why Sailing Today put us going through Pentland, but we didn't. We skirted straight for Shetland. So as you see, we've got 126 slides, so we'll try and pick up the pace for you a bit. So we started, we basically hitchhiked up the valley, started touring up, and very quickly realized that actually there was plenty of snow to get some skiing done.
As you can see from that last slide, the conditions were actually fantastic because the sun, I'm used to alpine skiing where the sun is often a bit more intense by this point. And in Norway, the angle of the sun is different. So you get less intensity on the snow. So it was still this lovely kind of, we were getting crystal snow that you would go through. It was also more stable in quite a lot of places than I would have been used to on similar slopes because of the fact that it was warming in a different way.
This is, on the first outing. So we're actually not that far above the snow line, but it quickly went from slush to powder. And at night we didn't actually get to see any northern lights on the whole trip, but the nights were super clear and really nice.
And because of the high mountains and the fjords it can get very still out on the water.
Okay, so we then had a dump of snow, and we'd heard about this cabin up one of the valleys that might have a winter room, or we might be able to get access to. So we put ourselves on this little pontoon here, worked our way up through the trees. At this point, we are able to actually ski from the boat.
Where it had snowed overnight that night as well, so we were suddenly able to just ski from the boat. So the sea to summit dream suddenly came true, something which I'd always dreamt about.
Yeah, so the plan was to work our way up through here, around this lake, over this col, down to the hut, and then bag a peak the next day. That was the morning we left. So we're now we're probably like halfway through April, maybe late April now. But the clarity, the whiteness of the snow was just made the light. I mean, it was fantastic, and the snow was fantastic, but it was incredibly flat light. As soon as the sun went in, you just couldn't see where you were going. And this is a tiny gap where a little bit of sun showed us the way up to the col, up to the right-hand side. And I just remember there being riverbeds, and
there's a lake.
Yeah, you'd literally just come across a riverbed with a kind of 10-foot drop into it.
It was quite hard going at this point because it had snowed much more heavily higher up overnight. Then we went from, a few centimeters at the bottom to then, it being a lot harder going over the col. We weren't quite sure whether we'd necessarily be able to make it over the col, as we were breaking trail as well at this point. But it was just spectacular now, being away from anyone, away from civilization.
A question: which fjord is this? I can find that out. It's, if you can find Sebo, which is just south of Ullesund, it's the one opposite that. But I will find that out for you. So at this point, we really do need to find this hut, and we're standing on the col, couldn't see the skis in front of our face, and then suddenly, typically with Norway, a gap in the clouds, this sun patch comes up, and then down to the right-hand side, you can see the roofs of the huts poking out of the snow. So we were like, go, go, go. And we weren't really sure how steep it was going to be down here, but then we suddenly realized it wasn't going to be dangerous steep in terms of avalanches. So we just all bombed it down as fast as we could to the hut. And we did manage to get in, and it was typically Norwegian style, really fantastic. And there was a wood burner and a stove, and
pristine inside. Again, being a bit more used to alpine huts, which are great, but the Norwegian huts were on a different level, with full cooking facilities, with food which people had left, with comfy beds, and we were able to get a wood burning stove going too.
So the next day, a little bit clearer, windy, went for a summit, not a particularly difficult one, but we had a crack, and we did actually have a lot more photos, but unfortunately when we came back from Norway, I had my car broken into and lost all my camera equipment. So we're going on the occasional phone photo and the ones that I did download, but there we are on the top, and the boats on the pontoon just at the bottom here. There's the high five, so just to prove we actually did make it. And the obligatory selfie.
The boat's down.
Yeah, the boat's down here.
You can see a pontoon in the fjord.
Yeah. So in a lot of these fjords, there's these just amazing pontoons that you just go up against, and there's no one around 90% of the time to charge you, or even wants to be charged. So yeah, and that's, we thought we were lucky, but actually that's what we encountered the entire trip. Okay, this is not taking away from Bob's trip with the Wild Bunch. This is an absolute rip-off of theirs, but whilst we have Bob on board, we thought we'd piece together our own little rendition of it.
1, 2, 3. When there's vicious storm at sea and all the ships are safe at shore, there's a tiny little sailboat that keeps sailing on for more. Oh, through hurricanes and cyclones, 40-meter waves and more. What's the name of that mighty sailboat that never goes to shore? It's the Dodo's Delight, it's the Dodo's Delight, shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight. Dodo's Delight, it's the Dodo's Delight, shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight. Oh, she sails straight through an iceberg like butter through a knife. She bounces over rocks like the chicken on the moon. Oh, well, tell me who's the captain who commands that mighty ship? It's Captain Reverend Bob. Hear the cracking of the whip. It's the Dodo's Delight, it's the Dodo's Delight, shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight, it's the Dodo's Delight, it's the Dodo's Delight, shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight. If you want to sail the Dodo, well, you better be tough. The crew is not so pretty, they're looking kind of rough. They don't always smell like roses, their socks often stink. And if they were too soft, they were made to walk the plank. Walk the plank! Shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight. It's the Dodo's Delight. It's the Dodo's Delight. Shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight. Well, there's Solly on his squeeze box, Nico on his mandolin. Out Sean Dave lit his whistle. The spoons are played by Finn.
The only problem is we've discovered that this is not actually the summit. This is the summit.
It's the Dodo's Delight. It's the Dodo's Delight. Shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight. It's the Dodo's Delight. It's the Dodo's Delight. Shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight.
I am captain of this ship, and I like her neat and tidy. Sailing on a bowline, hard on the wind. We will cross the ocean. We will weave through the ice. And why? Because it's nice.
It's the Dodo's Delight. It's the Dodo's Delight. Shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight. It's the Dodo's Delight. It's the Dodo's Delight. Shining bright and blue and white. It's the Dodo's Delight.
I'm just going to answer a question from John that is a good one. Did you have any detailed maps for the area? Are they available? And if so, accurate? Yes, Norway has a couple of things. There's one called norgstart.no, and that has topos and contours. The app of that allows you to put a layer on that shows you the steepness of the slopes. So anything above about 40 degrees starts to turn orange and then red, and it's really useful for ski touring. But that is norgstart.no. And they have a link, shall we, later? Yeah, we can share a link with it later, but there's an app for that as well, and we found that's really, really good for ski touring. Okay. So from there we went, so we are down here. I think I've selected so you can see my cursor, but down there is Sebo, and there's the there's where we were touring before. We then went up and around and over to Romsdal, to Andalsnes, and and that's the kind of famous Trollfjord area. And we'd heard that might be some good skiing there, at least later in the season. So we again hitchhiked up. The snow getting a little bit wet. We're to May now.
This is at least May.
May
yeah,
now,
if not
yeah.
early June.
So still good skiing, and we're nowhere near Lofoten this stage. We're still quite far down Norway. Had a nice gentle tour up a valley and thought we'd.
So this was accessible because the road had just opened that day or the day before.
Oh, yeah.
So we were able to actually get into the mountains. We hitchhiked again up with a Thai family actually, who thought it was a hilarious idea to go skiing.
Oh yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah,
they kindly took us up.
So we went up this valley and had these big bold intentions of digging a snow hole and
doing a round, I think,
and doing a round, yeah, and staying in the snow hole. But we ended up finding this big concrete platform, or from a distance seeing a kind of structure, and we thought we'd make our way to it. And then the idea of sleeping on this concrete platform that absorbed all the heat from the sun that day felt like quite a nice.
So we had bivy
proposition
equipment with us, which we were just gonna. It was actually not going to get dark really by that point. So we ended up cooking up just on the cliff face, and then finding it was nice and flat and not too cold to sleep on this big convenient concrete surface.
So we had a good night's sleep actually under the stars, but then at around about 5 or 6 a.m. This came along.
Clicked, or at least we were then very quickly realized that we were going to need to evacuate the area.
Yeah, so we were actually wondering what this station was, because we couldn't really figure out. It wasn't a hut or anything, and so it turned out that in fact we'd right on the edge of a cliff, and the whole cliff was quite unstable, and this was a monitoring station. So these guys were constantly monitoring this area in case it had fallen down into the valley, which I think there has been history of it in the past, and particularly one fjord around there actually had a huge landslide in the early 1900s that created a tidal wave that took away a couple of villages. But anyway, within 5 minutes, we were inside the cabin having coffee and biscuits with them and learning about geology and what they do, and getting some ski touring hints as well. So
we had a nice view though the night before, with the sun just kind of peeping behind the mountains as it went down before coming back up again. As you can see on the right, there's a river. So the reason behind why they were monitoring it so carefully was so that if they would know if it was going to landslide into the river and create a lake and possibly a big wave which would take the civilization away with it down further below the river.
Well, I think they were worried about it actually damming up the river and then flooding back up the valley because it was so flat. But so then we almost did our round, but the cloud came in and we managed to break through the top of the cloud and got this little summit in just above the clouds, which was just awesome. And we sat it there for a while waiting for it to clear, hoping that we'd get a really nice run down. It did drop a little bit, Emmie putting some fresh lines in there. Emmie's a way more experienced skier than I am, so I often get her to test the lines out first and then I'll follow down after. Okay, so now we're basically just working our way north now. We figure out the skiing where we are it's too unstable and it's just a bit wet. So now's the time to head for Lofoten. And here's just one of many waterfalls that we saw along the way.
Lots of snow melt.
Yeah, lots of snow melt by this point.
So during my time on board, I documented the changing landscape, sketching every day as England turned to Ireland, to Scotland and the Shetland Islands, and then the big push over to Norway. For this, I carried a range of different media with me. These pieces are mainly watercolors, which are really nice and capture an atmosphere, and also importantly can be packed away quite quickly if necessary. So traveling at this pace meant I was able to paint and sketch while sailing, but you needed to be careful to listen out for the changing weather, when there were times when I didn't quite listen carefully enough, and suddenly your paints, pens and water and half-made work would scatter in all directions unless you could secure them fast enough. But the wind and the choppy seas would also lend themselves to capturing an atmosphere, as you were sometimes buffeted from side to side, and then sometimes water would spray onto the work, and it would end up being ending up in unplanned but interesting ways. So these are just some extracts from my sketchbook. The piece on the right hand side is looking up at the trees on the hillside, which is made from pencils, acrylics and oil pastels.
So yeah, working our way up the coast, many of you who have sailed in Scandinavia will kind of recognize this sort of thing, but for those of you who don't, and one of the biggest things that we'd found was that on the first day after we left Angelness, we headed out beyond the islands and started heading up the coast, and figured like we've got to get beyond the islands, otherwise it's just going to be too much difficulty in navigation, just constantly weaving our way around. Anyway, it was really rough out there, and the first thing we saw was a load of Hurtigruten vessels, big ships going in and amongst the islands, and we just thought, stuff this. If they can go wind their way in amongst all of these rocks, then we definitely can. And from then on, we never went outside the islands again. And so we were sailing constantly in flat water, but we would never have to plan a passage plan, because at any point there was any number of anchorages or small little island settlements to choose from. This one, I think, I don't know, probably free. I recall it costing us about £1 in the honesty box. Or we might just go right alongside, which did quite a lot. It was deep enough in most cases. And this app is called Havneguiden, and it was absolutely indispensable for Norway, we found, and just allowed us to passage plan on the fly. You subscribe per area, so we just subscribed for the north of Norway. I don't know, it costs £10 or something, but it has so much information, and even all of the anchorages have an aerial view. So it's such a useful app for passage planning in Norway. One of the villages, many villages that are just really quaint and really nice. Mostly, old fishing villages that are now holiday homes, but this one in particular was a fishing village.
It's called Bjornsen. So this piece is, I painted it while we were there, and it was the first time that the ferry had arrived that year. So just a piece about the Viking spirit, and as water wanderers, and how a lot of the fishing villages' houses still propped up on stilts, which would have in the past have been to accommodate the multitude of fishermen and their boats who would have descended in the winter to fish. In this piece, it was a bit intriguing. There were lots of seagulls nesting in the tires, the car tires, as pier fenders on the left-hand side. Each time a boat would dock, I feared the worst for the birds, but then the boats would move away and the birds would be all right, thankfully.
Oh well, I've just seen it on the chat from Dave. The mountain fell this last year. God. So, Dave, is that the exact one we were camping on that fell? Is that what you mean?
Sounds like it.
Gosh, that's really interesting. We'll look that up afterwards. Amazing. not amazing for the people below it, but okay. So again, another amazingly generous thing. A fisherman, I was asking about crab potting and stuff, and this fisherman gave us a crab pot and told us the best bait to use and where to put it. And then from then on, for the rest of summer, it was crab on the menu.
Although technically we actually were soon informed by the Coast Guard we needed a Norwegian on board to use them.
Yeah, we were going along on this big posh Norwegian vessel, radios, vessel Shadowfax. Do you know that you have you got a license to use that, or have you got permission to use that crab pot, considering you're a British vessel? And we were like, no. And then they said, well, have you got a Norwegian on the board? You can only use it if you have a Norwegian on board. Anyway, we promised never to use it again. And
until we left.
Yes. And they don't call them king crab for no reason. Whoa!
Oh my God!
Oh my God. I wasn't pressing hard at all, he just took it. Okay, so fishing, catching cod was just the easiest thing once we'd actually spoke to some locals and got the right lure. And that's actually a pollock on the right that Emmie's got. But it was basically cod,
cod curry,
cod stew, cod risotto,
cod salad,
cod and tomato sauce,
cod pasta,
cod Karelian rice cake, cod everything basically. So basically, if you don't like cod, don't go to Norway. Okay, so next we're sailing along, aiming for Lofoten, getting in the miles each day, and we look across onto, you're constantly got this range of mountains on the right hand side which were luring us in, but we're like, no, we must get to Lofoten. And we saw this big lenticular cloud, this big curved cloud over the top of the mountains, and we're like, wow, gosh, look at that, it's really big. And then we're like, actually, are we sure that's a cloud? And then we look on the map and realize, in fact, it's not a cloud. It's actually the Svartisen Plateau. Which is this huge glacier that comes down in various different parts to fjords and lakes. And we figured, actually, okay, we've got skis, we've got the equipment, we've got the time, let's go and have a look. So we went up this fjord and put ourselves on side this little pontoon here. It says marina, it's really not, it's a bit of a rickety pontoon. And deployed the bikes, which we have in the sail locker, and all of our glacier gear. Stash the bikes in a bush and start walking.
It was a fair walk up with gear as well, although we weren't camping, we were going to stay in a hut, but still we had some ropes and various equipment for doing a glacier crossing.
It actually looks like I piled all the weight onto you there, but
probably
I think it was fairly evenly distributed. Anyway, we get, the cloud comes in and we burst out of the clouds, and there's the hut, which is open, and it remains just above the clouds. We've got midnight sun at this point, so it's light the whole time. In typical fashion, the hut was just really well equipped, really nice, had gas, had little mezzanine beds up there.
Candlesticks, chandeliers, and older climbing equipment on the side.
Yeah, just really nice. I mean, I could have spent a month up there. It was just awesome. And up in the mezzanine bed, we then woke up nice and early to attempt a crossing. And that's our view out of the bedroom window. So the next day we crack on across the glacier completely in the wrong, on the wrong skis and boots. We now got fairly rigid boots for downhill ski touring. So our blisters started kicking in fairly soon. But we're heading for this peak over in the corner, which is the highest point. And from here we think, oh, well, that's not so far. And it's not so high either. I mean, that's, you know, barely 100 meters high. Anyway, and that was, 7 or 8 hours later, we're still going, but eventually get up there. And again, even now, even on this, it doesn't, the distances are kind of hard to kind of calculate. It didn't really matter because the weather forecast was good and it was going to be light the entire time. But you get, I'll say afterwards, but these are the clouds were whipping past, but never actually making it onto the actual glacier itself. So we did actually have clear skies the entire time.
I think the hut was known as something like above the clouds or misty misty hut. Or...
we can find that out. We can find out the name of the hut actually. Question here: what were the daytime, nighttime temperatures? Oh, that's a good question actually. Daytime was really pleasant.
This is July by this point.
Yeah, this would be July by this. So daytime was, I don't know, 10, 15. Yeah, up on the glacier. Nighttime, just sub-zero maybe there. Up at the hut.
Yeah.
But down in the fjords, you know, it was warm. It was, you know, British summer
and
temperature.
It's what, about 800 meters here, 700.
Yeah, maybe.
And the clouds are filmed on a time lapse.
Yeah, time lapse. Anyway, so I was saying how the kind of the heights and distances are hard to say, but if you watch Emmie ski down here, and when the video ends, she's still putting in turns. And given also that Emmie's a really experienced skier, she's actually putting in some tight turns here because the GoPro makes it look a lot less steep than it is. Okay, so we got down from the glacier and headed straight across to Lofoten from there. First stop, Henningsvær. And we made for Henningsvær really because it's the climbing capital and you can see why behind.
The mountains that claw-like go steeply up from the sea. Really spectacular. Would have been an amazing place to ski as well. And there's a good guidebook for anyone who does end up there, which you can get from the climbing building. It's
a fairly easy entrance. The piece of water to cross to Lofoten is meant to be a bit treacherous, but it wasn't so bad. But you can enter and get from any or quite a few different directions here, and there was an anchorage at the back here also. We were fortunate enough to again get some Norwegian hospitality, and the owner of the climbing shop and cafe said, "Oh, just pull up alongside. You can use my berth." And so from there, we also met. I don't know if they're on actually. Maybe give us a wave if you are, Larry and Denise, who are OCC members, and it actually kind of told us that we should join the OCC back then.
Yeah.
Just going to answer a couple of questions. Insects ever a problem? No, not at all. Didn't get midges, or I don't even remember mosquitoes. Was the mosquitoes?
We did lower down, but only once we went further south and quite briefly. Although I've heard you can really suffer with them on land anyway.
Yeah.
At sea, it was never that bad.
Oh yeah. My niece is there. the sailing app, Havneguiden. I can share that afterwards.
We'll link to
Yeah,
it.
Havneguiden. So basically, harbour guide in Norwegian.
So Henningsvær is actually a really old established civilization, which dates back to 1556 or so. Hugely rich fishing ground. But it was sort of back in the day that it was busier than it is now. So there would have been at least 1,000 residents, particularly who came, I think, in the winter. And they were there, I think, in particular for the cod, which today is mostly exported.
Some whaling ships, I believe, also pulled into Henningsvær. Cod drying racks all over the place, mostly shipped to Spain, and where else did we hear? Nigeria.
All over Nigeria. Yeah.
And you would think that, oh, maybe they're just putting these on show for the tourists, but in fact, we went to some pretty remote villages in Lofoten also, and they were everywhere.
Although, however, now they commercially are often stored in dried indoors with heaters. So this is a more traditional way of drying them.
Organic cod.
Yeah. Here's a piece that I was making en route. So this is of Henningsvær, using some of the materials which were found once we were there. So it's a mixture of some of the fishing warehouses, as well as some of the summer residences, which the warehouses have now been converted into sort of trendy Norwegian residences. But it was just fun watching the comings and goings, and while you're painting and sketching, you get the chance to see who's who and understand a little bit more of the life that's going on there. So this is using maps, nets, and champagne label, I think, which might have been opened once we got there.
Mary Beth is asking, what is it they're drying? Mary, they're drying cod, basically. Yeah, dried cod that then is shipped all over the world and a bit of a delicacy.
Salted. It's used a lot in European cooking. Often, sometimes there's a stew, but you have to dehydrate it for 2 to 3 days.
Rehydrate it.
Sorry, rehydrate.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We actually had some. It was quite different too. It almost gives it a kind of chewy flavour like monkfish once it's been.
But I don't think we dehydrated it enough.
Yeah, it was quite nice. But by that time, we were eating cod like the entire time anyway, so we were getting codded out. So we're in Henningsvær to go climbing, and that was the
climbing capital there.
Yeah, that was the main reason. So Emmie being kind of the front runner up to now, skiing and being the dominant force there. Now it was my turn to get onto the climbing, and Emmie hadn't really done a whole lot of traditional climbing before. So traditional climbing is where you use your own equipment to start at the bottom and end at the top and bring everything with you. There's no bolts or screwing or drilling. And so we did a few days of just training on the cliffs just outside Henningsvær, which were all really good. But our main purpose was to do some big routes, which Lofoten is famous for. So this is one that we really wanted to do. And what's funny is actually you can finish these routes late in the day, and people are turning up at any point because the sun is out the whole entire time. So why not climb in the middle of the night? But this is about a 10 pitch climb, give or take, and it's a crack climb. So this picture actually here is not us. It was because my camera was stolen. It's one of the only ones I can find pointing down the climb, just to give you a kind of an impression. And we're going to follow this green route up here, and each point stop. For those of you that don't know climbing, you stop and swap over. But crack climbing is you either love it or you hate it. You either can do it or you can't do it. You have to kind of jam your fingers in, jam your toes in, and yeah, that's basically it. And if you're not comfortable doing that, then you can really come a cropper. And this kind of gives you an idea. The kind of cracks break up. Then there's these flakes. You got these really nice corners, and then it turns into just single cracks. And what we'd actually tried to do is you try and work it out so that the strongest climber gets the hardest pitches and the weaker climber gets the easier ones. However, early on in the climb, one of us had doubled up and done 2 pitches in one go, which left Emmie doing the crux route on crack climbing, which she's never really done before, and never really climbed a whole lot of traditional climbing before. But there's Emmie just whizzing up it and clearly showing that actually crack climbing is definitely her thing. Okay, so we then went further on around the Lofoten to try and see what else we can find.
It's like a water world there, that it's either lakes or rivers going all the way through the islands. Yeah, the Lofotens are absolutely spectacular because you can get altitude so quickly.
Paul says, are there mixed grades? By that, do you mean mixed in difficulty, as in not all hard, or do you mean mixed climbing as in other winter grades there? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
There are a big variety of grades though.
There are, yeah. So that grade, the grade of that climb was a Norwegian grade, but that probably was
6.
English grade HVS maybe, sport grade 6A maybe, but yeah, totally, there's loads of grades. And what's amazing about Norway is that you can do these huge long routes without actually going into the super hard grades. There are some really big routes that actually are around V-diff and severe. Okay, so this was actually our favorite fjord of Lofoten, Kirkfjord, K-J-E-R-K, Fjorden, and you have to have a total height of less than 18.5 meters
to get under the bridge. So we have about 19.5, but it was at low tide, even though there's very little tide there, and we figured that we might possibly be able to scrape under it. And the only way that we could do that is by sending Emmie up the mast. And we went a bit like this. No, absolutely no way. Actually, maybe, yes, go. So we did scrape under it. By how much did we clear? There was room. There was definitely room.
Well, for a moment there was definitely no way, and then we did it. So we got in there, and it was just this amazing playground of walking, of climbing, of swimming, and no villages. The tiny little kind of settlement at the end, but just I would absolutely recommend, if you can get under that bridge, to go into this fjord.
This is the departure point is Ren from the Lofotens, and it's the fjord which goes up from there.
Somebody says, love your work, Emmie. Have you got a website? If you type Emmie van Beverley into Google, or emmyvb.com.
Well, let's just link to it at the end.
Okay. I'll just type it in there. So yeah, there's these abandoned fishing stations and just amazing colours and amazing light. It was a really, really special place.
We're at 9 o'clock now.
Oh, Simon, how long do we have?
Well, you're answering questions as you go, Tim. So yeah, keep soldiering on. We're enjoying it.
Okay, cool. So the other thing about this field was that there would be these little coals, and then they would drop into these other abandoned, or not abandoned, but wild valleys with these amazing beaches And again, these distances, like you think, oh, well, you could walk down here and you'll go up to this beach, and you're talking 15 minutes walk, but that's probably about an hour. There were fish in this lake. It was just really spectacular. That's the kind of view. This isn't actually my photo, but I thought I'd include it because we didn't actually get to do much climbing here. We did a little route up the side here, but the possibility of doing a fantastically epic traverse in this fjord would be amazing. And I thought I'd also just include this topo of another climb I'd like to go back and do, a 600-meter ascent over 20 pitches, I believe, on the left there, up just a sheer granite wall, just 600 meters straight up. I know there's a couple of climbers in the group at the moment that I know personally will be looking at this just thinking, wow. Anyway, that's enough of a reason just to go back for me. So we now, hopefully you can see my cursor, but we whipped through the back now, or the north side of the spur of Lofoten, and then up to this set here and to Sortland. And we thought, okay, well, that's kind of a bit off the beaten track, and it might be nice to go cycling there. Deployed the bikes, and it was much more forested. And we took all our camping gear.
So we've got quite a lightweight tent, but each time we still do seem to get as much into the panniers as we can fit. But it is helped by having freeze-dried meals so that we're not having to carry too much weight. Same with ski touring or walking if we're overnighting somewhere, that just makes it a lot more feasible.
Yeah, we always carry freeze-dried stuff just to make adventures on the hoof much more easy. And then we were going along, and I was losing the will to live because it was a bit wet, it was a bit cold on one of the days. Emmie was soldiering on and saying, come on, there'll be something around this corner. And we were going up this dirt track right north of this island group, and everything was just looking a bit miserable. The ground was wet, we had a wet tent, and then suddenly the last end of the road, the last thing was this village called Nixund, which had been taken over by German artists and about 10 years ago, and converted into this amazing little village that was just totally off plan, with loads of artists and sculptors and little restaurants. And I thought it was like a bit of a dream because I was, as I say, I was just ready to pack it all in. And I was just being a Yorkshireman, I was just dreaming of tea and cake. And that's exactly what we found, a little cafe serving tea and cake. And I just passed out. Woke up to find the owners then offering us their little apartment upstairs, looking out over the village. And meanwhile, while I'm comatose on tea and cake, Emmie's grabbing the opportunity to get some work done. And this was one of her pieces.
On the right-hand side of this piece, you can kind of see a wave. So the village had originally been abandoned in the 50s because a big wave had come over and had destroyed quite a few of the buildings there. But since, I think from the 80s, this is called Nixon, and it had been developed, I think first of all, a university had come, and then people had repopulated it. It just turned into this really creative centre now, with lots of artists working, and we just found it by chance.
Oh, and that was where we'd left the boat. Actually, we'd found yet another marina that was free, and we got back after cycling, and this chap was like, "Oh, I've been looking at your boat for the last few days. Where have you been?" And we said we'd been to Nixon. He was like, "Oh, if you'd told me, we have a house there and you could have stayed there." And he was willing to just give us the key and we could just go and stay in his house. It's just unbelievable. Okay, so from Sortland, the red dot is actually marking where Nixon is, if you want to make note of that. But Sortland, we then cruised up to Anasnes, where the continental shelf, you can see up here, the continental shelf comes right up. And then there's a little kind of spur inside here where it just goes from 3,000 meters up to 50 or so. And this is where apparently it's the Kingdom of Wales. So we went up there. We were coming up there around about 9 p.m. thinking we'd go into Blick here. And we did actually. And then we just decided, well, the sun's out. What are we doing? Why don't we just go out and look for whales now? So we did. And we didn't see a whole lot, but we did manage to just get that.
Which is the only whale we've ever seen, actually.
Yeah, it came out of the water, and then just before it dived, we managed to get
amazing.
that shot. So then after that, we looked on the map and found that from Google Satellite and thought, oh, that looks like quite a nice place to anchor off for a few days. And that's just round the headland from Anasnes. And yeah, it just kind of gives you the idea, the clarity of the water up there. Yeah. We're anchored off over here. It also gives you an indication of the tide. There's probably only about, I don't know, a couple of foot. And to answer the question earlier about the temperature, we can't actually remember, but I know Emmie won't get into a bikini below 20 degrees.
We were also slacklining. There's a line across there, which we had a line, a bit like a trapeze going from one side that we were just practicing. So I didn't want to have too many clothes on for that because I was going to fall in.
I've just seen there's some more questions. John said, are there no big tides issue with tidal races? No, not at all. Although, they do have one of the biggest tidal races in the world there, but no, not at all. There's barely any tide. I missed the audio earlier, but do you often catch crabs? Yes, we did. We did catch crabs, quite a lot of them. And okay, so at this point then we were heading back down south, and there was a good forecast, a northerly, for about a good 10 days forecast, and we thought, okay, well, we'll take that. But this is just a quick film of just showing how easy the sailing was. It was always flat, and it just meant the boat speed was always really high, and it just kind of gives an impression about what the sailing was like. Short but sweet, but that's, yeah, it was like that the whole way, really. And sometimes, I mean, even if it was blowing a gale, we'd still sail because it was always just flat and protected. We'd just reef up and just shoot along. Again, coming down, completely different anchorages this time. We'd take a completely different route through the islands, but sometimes pulling alongside, sometimes shorelining. Oh yeah, this is
so, well, this is just a piece based on we the four of us, we had friends on board, went to watch the sun going down and then coming straight back up again. And the light, the crimson light's just really beautiful. This
is almost the last part of the last of the midnight sun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
At that point. Yeah, with shoreline, at this point we were getting really comfortable with shorelining and really comfortable with creeping in with just a few inches under the keel. Sometimes getting help from the shore parties.
Local inhabitants.
Double shorelining often if we didn't want to swing around.
We did suffer with insects actually here.
Oh, that
we got absolutely eaten.
That was
midges.
Yeah, one time where there was, yeah, but not often. Another free pontoon, another lovely little village. And then, oh yeah, and then the traditional roofs on the islands. Mary, what kind of boats are you sailing? A Seastream 43, Ian Anderson design, built in Falmouth. And another really nice village on the way down, just north of the Stat headland. That's the infamous Stat headland that has a lot of rough weather. But this is a lovely little village that we came into, and Emmie decided to deploy the paintbrushes again.
We just arrived with the sun setting that evening, and it glowed red onto the lighthouse up above. So we ran up to just catch the last glow of it settings, of it going down. And the villages are just so pristine and so well kept. You'd see people painting them the whole time to keep them well maintained.
Oh, the name of this village. Sorry, I have a note of this. Husoya. That's Emmie's final piece. Okay, so from here we're now shooting down past Bergen, and
it now starts to rain actually quite a lot. We've had the weather's been great, and now it just rains for 2 weeks straight.
Yeah, and we heard that once we get down to Bergen it might start to get a bit wet, and that's exactly what happened. So it did start to rain, and anyway we got down to Stavanger, which we thought would be a good staging post to cross back to the UK, and then took a detour up Lysfjorden. And that's that famous one that if you type kind of Norway fjord and you see pictures of people up on the cliffs, but it's actually a really wild fjord. Particularly on the right there, as you see, there's these big cliffs and really steep slopes. And we had a couple of days going down there and exploring and going running and stuff. And then on the way back, this is just one of the huge waterfalls that's cascading down the sides of Lysfjorden. And that kind of gives you a bit of a kind of inkling of how steep the sides are on this one. But as we were going back on this fjord, Emmie spotted something in the distance on the side of the fjord flashing, like an orange flashing thing. And again, the distance is huge. So the width of this fjord is at least about a kilometre and a half. And we thought, what is that? So we got the binoculars out, and it's two guys stood on the edge of a rock with a steep cliff above them that was much actually higher than this cliff in the photo on the other side of the fjord. And they're waving their rain cover for their rucksack. And so we think, okay, those guys have blatantly got themselves stuck. So we went over there, and that's exactly what had happened. These two German lads had decided to go for a trip to Norway and go walking without any maps or GPS, had started coming down a cliff to get down, thinking there might be a village, down some cliffs with some ropes, and then pulling the rope after them, and got themselves onto this tiny little rock on the side of the fjord, and had been there for quite a while. And there was no boats we hadn't seen any other boats going up and down this fjord. Anyway, Emmie went up onto the bow, put some ladders on the bow.
We approached it first, and because we were ready to cross now to go back to the UK. We had no dinghy set up.
Yeah.
So we asked them whether they were prepared to swim. So they started to strip off. We then realized that actually the fields are so deep that
two hulking great Germans lads in the late teens stripping off with Emmie on the bow.
But then we realized that we can actually probably inch the boat into the sort of spit of rock that they're on to try and rescue them.
Yeah, because the cliffs just literally carry on into the fjord at exactly the same angle. So the wind was getting up at this point. We pushed the bow right up to the rock, one of them chucks their bag on and jumps onto the boarding ladder.
It's got really nerve-wracking because it's starting to blow about 27 by this point.
Yeah. And anyway, we got them on board, and within 5 minutes they were going through a pretty perilous situation where no boats were going up and down this field, and they were probably going to stay on this rock for a while. And then suddenly they're on board drinking tea, eating biscuits, and having a good time. And we dropped them off, got their emails, I think, and changed, but we didn't hear anything from them for ages. And then about a year later, we get this. Oh, you can't see this. I'm gonna just stop sharing my screen because this is where the talk ends. But I think they can. Simon, can everyone see us anyway?
Sorry, Tim. Yes, we can see you. So
okay, right.
Yeah, just play away.
Oh
wow! Go left a bit. There you go. Fantastic.
So you can see there's a photo there that they sent us.
Yeah.
And then there's a letter really nice letter that they wrote us. And then we actually submitted the story to PBO. So we ended up getting an Everett painting of the situation with the guys jumping on the bow. But that was really lovely, actually, about a year later after we'd almost forgotten about it. So yeah, that was it really. And then we were back to Stavanger and took a really good passage back down to the south coast.
Thank you.
The trip.
Well, what a fantastic story, both of you. I was a bit disappointed, to be honest, that you didn't use your grandfather's rescue gun to get the two Germans on.
That's a really good point, actually.
Presumably you didn't carry it on the boat, because obviously that would have been the obvious thing to use, to fire this thing at these poor German guys and blow them out of the water. And the fact that you'd got a ladder on your boat, as well as sets of skis, road bicycles, artist studio, climbing gear, lobster pots. Where on earth did you put Bob?
Yeah, he was crammed into the forepeak.
Yeah, quite fantastic.
He settled in nicely.
That was a lovely talk, both. Thank you very much. I'm sure there's lots of questions. There's questions on the Q&A. There's questions on the chat that Tim and Emmie have been answering as they go. But if people want to put their hands up, I will bring them in and they can ask them in person. So I know Martin Fuller's had his hand up for a long time. So Martin, I've opened your microphone if you want to talk away now, or anybody else that wants to come in, please do put your hands up.
I mean, that was done at the very beginning, but thank you for the talk. It was fascinating. And we hope to get up there at some stage. When you were skiing, did you consider using avalanche airbags in your rucksacks, or was that something that was just too much to carry?
I think they're great and they work really well. I've just found them so far that they're too heavy to ski tour with. We did talk to ski guys before going who were saying it was where we were going was relatively stable snow. Of course, that's not a reason to not carry them. And I think once they get light enough, and if I was doing enough big downhill then they are good. They're still not infallible, actually. Friends have still got into quite a lot of trouble with them, but they're good.
Yeah, I mean, we're fairly cautious. If we feel that the route up is a little bit, we'll tend to take ridge lines on the tops. I'd say we're reasonably cautious when it comes to.
It's just something that probably every season I'll assess again to see whether they're lighter. But otherwise, particularly if you're taking overnight gear as well, for me it would be difficult to take an airbag.
Yeah.
Would you have been able to fit an airbag on the boat? I'm just curious. You must have the most. It must be a TARDIS-like boat. It's 43
we
feet.
Did have quite a lot. We had 3 paragliders and 2 sets of diving gear. Quite a few other bits and bobs as well. So probably not.
And a lobster pot.
Well, we gave that away actually by Spain, but
Fantastic.
We've now got one back again, having come back to the UK.
Fantastic. It sounds like a real boys' own adventure, but very good. Fantastic. Anybody else got? Oh yes, there's a question up from David Smith. So David, I've opened your microphone if you want to come in.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Hi, David.
Yep, great talk, Tim and Emmie. Really enjoyed that. As a keen sailor, skier, and climber, it really fitted. Just wanted to ask, what time of year or what month was it you were in Lofoten? It didn't look like there was much snow left there by the time you got there.
Yeah, that's right. We had missed the snow by that point, so it was July. We'd enjoyed it lower down. We decided just to concentrate on not traveling so quickly initially at the mountains around Öresund, and to enjoy it there. We had hoped to get up to Lofoten, yes, to ski, but that will have to be saved for another year. It looks absolutely tantalizing though.
I mean, it could have gone two ways. If we hadn't have met Bob, then we may well have gone from Shetland and thought, I tell you what, let's beeline it for Lofoten, do some skiing, and then work our way down slowly. So we could have ended up in Lofoten for early April. But the Sunmore Alps were fantastic, and as you could see, we were skiing there until late May. But yeah, I mean, definitely Senja, Lofoten, all of that area, I think we'd love to go back to and ski. But definitely not. Yeah, there's nothing. I mean, there was no snow at all.
Do you have plans to go back to northern Norway to ski?
Yeah, we had planned to go to Svalbard this year. That's unfortunately not going to happen with everything that's going on. And then we'd have possibly wintered out after that, and then got a really early season in Lofoten next year. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Everything's up in the air at the moment, isn't it?
And now Brexit to contend with also, so that's more complicated.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Great. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks.
Tim and Emmie, there's a question from it's just jumped up. Edward, about have you found the Seastream 43 overall? Apart from, of course, being a TARDIS, how do you find the boat?
Yeah, so it's not a racehorse, although I say that it's an old heavyweight. I'd say it's not a racehorse, but when we were coming back from Biscay this year, we were just off the wind, and a catamaran did come past us, but he had his full rig out on a point of sail that he should be doing pretty well, and we were only losing half a knot to him. So, we passage plan at 6.5 to 7.
Well, 5 sometimes.
Well, if it's not blown, we need a good blow, put it that way. But yeah, she's really solid. We'll never get water over the tow rail really, and we'll barely start reefing.
But it's about 17 tons, so it needs probably from about 15 knots up to about 30. It's quite happy in, and then we're pretty nice and stable.
Yeah, and we really like the windows all the way around.
It's in terms of a good kind of liverboard, then it's really nice and light inside. So if you want to work in there or just hang out, or it's cold, then it's a good space.
It's built to Lloyd's spec, and it's built how you'd expect. It's really stiff, but yeah, not a greyhound.
Yeah, we have a deck saloon just for that reason, for cruising in northern latitudes, and so that you can enjoy it even though it's cold out there.
Yeah,
which is fantastic. You've got quite a few questions on there. Somebody's commenting that the skiing in the Lofoten isn't brilliant. Climate's normally too mild. This is Peter Simonson. Better conditions inland from the Lofoten to that latitude. Lingen is great, quite a bit further north though.
Yeah.
Fee Jones says, thank you very much for a great talk and for sharing this beautiful artwork. We enjoyed your talk very much. Just ask people to put their hands up if they want to come in and talk. Otherwise, we can read your chats. Are there places you could leave the boat relatively cheaply?
Yeah, so
certainly are.
That's an interesting one, and I think it depends on how old school you are. There are definitely places. I mean, it seems so safe and so honest, Norway. There are definitely places you could literally drop a hook, put some shorelines, and just leave it. And I'm sure you'd come back to the boat a year later and it'd be fine. And so there's that. If you ask the landowner, I'm sure if you ask some of the villages, on the islands. If you could leave it there, they might be able to. We left it in Ullesund for a week or so, or a bit more.
No, a month.
Was it a month?
Yeah.
And that was with a marina, a kind of yacht club. But I think to answer your question, yeah, there is. It depends how you want to do it. There's not that many marinas as such, but there's tons and tons of pontoons and harbours that would, I'm sure they would.
Norway was actually one of the cheaper places, strangely, that we ended up cruising in, because there's so much to do, which doesn't involve being, well, in a restaurant or a cafe, or so we stocked up quite well before leaving, and then we caught quite a lot of cod and fish, and then just stocked up a little bit en route, and very occasionally ate out. Although
if you account for the fact that there's the water, your water's free everywhere, your mooring is pretty much free most of the time, there's an abundance of cod, it actually turns out a hell of a lot cheaper than cruising in most places, even though if you do go for a pint, expect to pay 20 quid for it.
Yeah, sure. We spent, I can't remember how many weeks, a couple of months in Norway, and we provisioned in Lowick, or in Orkney actually, and managed to live on British rations. And I think ate out once, and that just destroyed our budget for the whole summer, I think. And I think that was just a beef burger. It was nothing exotic.
And you might have been alongside a whole lot of Norwegians who'd come over on a booze cruise.
Yeah, going the other way.
Over.
Going the other way. There's a question from Henry Murdoch, who said, how did you find the remote communities got supplied? Of course, the coastal ferry service is very sophisticated, isn't it? The Hurtigruten.
Yeah, they even say that with the main boats crossing the fjords, they just treat them like bridges, because they're going so fast backwards and forwards that the cars are barely waiting any time. And then on the islands, everybody has a boat.
Yeah, sure.
Proper water spirits, most people there.
Yeah.
Jerry, I think you have your microphone open. Do you want to come in?
I just wanted to say that actually it's true that it's expensive to eat out in Norway, but one must admit that it's also gotten to be excellent often. So you do eat quite a bit of cod in many different ways, but they cook it very, very, very well. And whereas a number of years ago it was pretty terrible, like UK cooking, for example, now it's
well, that's good to know. We're saving you up desperately. This guy's speaking from Switzerland, of course, where the exchange rate is up here somewhere.
It's true that indeed in the shops and so the prices you get are similar to what you find in Switzerland. So indeed, for us, it doesn't seem to be that bad, but coming from elsewhere, it can be rather stiff. But indeed, it's good value for the money. Often.
Yeah, Thierry, we won't tell you how expensive we find Switzerland at the moment.
Well, I guess.
Very good. What time do we have? It's 9:30. Does anybody else want to come in with any questions? Any of the panel that have got their microphones open? There's
Someone
quite
just
a few.
said, what's the app? The app I mentioned again. I'm just going to find that for you exactly.
Well, we found your art very, very nice, Emmie. I mean, it's very pretty. So we're going to look at what you have on the web and see what you find that you did, because what you showed here was really wonderful. I mean, these red backlights give an impression of light which is seldom seen. So,
thank you. It was partly inspired by a Norwegian artist who really captures. We didn't really see the northern lights like you guys did actually, but she captures the kind of the very strong light. You still get an interesting a strong crimson light in the summer, which intensifies the landscape around as well. So I'm a sort of a learning landscape artist, but happy with doing buildings in particular, but which are all pristine also in Norway.
And indeed, the impression you give of these villages
rings bells when one knows them. So yeah, we
good.
like them for the images, but also for the art just per se.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you.
And Emmie as well, lovely videos of you skiing those linked turns off piste. Slightly disappointed there weren't any pictures of Tim, because I suspect Tim's more of a kind of British mountaineer skier, which usually has quite the same grace and elegance in my experience. But have you got any video of Tim skiing? Oh, they're frozen. I think we've lost Tim and Emmie. Okay. I think we have lost Tim and Emmie. I think their internet's collapsed. Thierry, can you still hear me? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
good.
That's fine. I see you move and I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, likewise, Simon. I can still hear you and see you.
Oh, Tim and Emmie are back, I think, but muted, Tim. So.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I was trying to look up the name of the app and I hit off my hotspot.
That's no problem. I was probably insulting your skiing without any idea of how you ski.
Yeah, you don't want to ski.
But most British mountaineer skiers don't ski with the grace and elegance that Emmie does.
We need some more time in the Alps, hopefully.
I'm a functional skier.
Functional skier, yeah.
And occasional, well, there's a few moments of picking up the equipment, but
a few stacks.
Yeah.
Great. Guys, I think it's time to wind up. It's been a lovely evening. Really enjoyed it.
Much.
It's brought back very many memories of our trip to Lofotens, particularly the bridge that you got under that we couldn't get under. We went up there by dinghy and walked on those slabs on the right-hand side of that fjord. Can't remember the name of it, by Rainer, which was just absolutely magnificent. And tempted us back. So if we can't get back to Canada this year, maybe we'll get a motorboat and get in Norway or something, who knows. But lovely talk. Thank you very much. I will send you the email contacts of everybody who's dialed in tonight. I think you had an audience of over 205. You've still got an audience of 127, an hour and 40 minutes on, so you must be doing something right tonight. The emails will be on there, so if you want to answer any of the questions from or pick up on any of the comments, then feel free to email the participants. But thank you very much for a lovely, entertaining evening.
Well, thanks so much for being. Yeah, it's a real honour to be part of the OCC and all the expertise and knowledge and stories. So
Sure.
we're really looking forward to the rest of the talks and getting to know people a bit better.
Great, and we'll be putting the video up probably overnight. It takes a while to upload, but hopefully by tomorrow it'll be online on the OCC webinar page. And next week we've got Nick Owens, who's still online. He's going to be taking a completely different tack. He's going to be telling us about some marine science. Nick was the director of the British Antarctic Survey and currently works up in Scotland, where Thierry's boat is, actually very close to Thierry's boat, as the director of the Scottish Association of Marine Sciences. So we're going to have a very different talk tomorrow, next week. And I think the week after that, or soon after that, we've got Barbara and Thierry telling us about their trip from St. Petersburg to the White Sea.
Yeah, very much looking. Well, that's a trip we've got our eye on.
Great. So I'm closing down, but thank you very much. And I think you've given us a great evening. Cheers now.
Great. Thanks. Cheers.
Thanks, Simon.
Good evening, everybody.
Bye, Thierry. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.